Therefore, when I come up to your home to knock on the door, and I'm a door-to-door salesman, and the wife answers the door, who answers the door? The husband answers the door. And I like to carry a little further. 12-year-old Johnny answers the door, and who answers the door? The father answers the door. And if you run a real good home, you'll have carbon copies right down to the last one. Does the wife have to say, come back this evening when my husband's here, if he's there now? By the way, he isn't physically there, but is he there? He's there. Does this save a little bit of time for him? He doesn't have to come home and worry about the management of that household. You say, can a man get so important he hasn't time to manage his own household? Absolutely he can. And does he have to have an actual unity relationship so that there's another one of him? And is he satisfied with what she's doing? You know, a thing that amazes me about the American public. Here's this woman who has fought the 50-50 concept of marriage until she's tired and tense and neurotic and full of hives. And she's announced to all the neighbors, I am boss. I have won every fight to date. Puts the sign on the bulletin board, the opinions of the husband are not necessarily those of the management. And she continues acting this way until the little tiny squeaky salesman knocks on the door to sell a $12 item. And she has to say, I can't buy it. And he has to say, well, don't you need it? Oh, I need it. Would your husband want you to have it? He told me I should buy it. Well, isn't it priced right? It's the best price we've seen on it. Don't you like the brand? That's the brand he told me I should buy. Well, then why can't you buy it? Well, she says it costs $12. I have a $10 limit. Now, is that ironic? Why can't you go out and tell the neighbor ladies, I'm the boss, I've got a $10 limit? If she were the husband, what would she do? Buy it if it cost how much? Well, how much is he allowed to spend? If she is him, can she spend whatever he would spend? All right, well, if he's going to buy this whole building over here for $1 million, what could she do? Well, if he can do it, and she is him, can she do it? I want to show you that if you really want freedom tonight, you will actually train all of the subordinate roles underneath you to be you. And you'll give them that much authority. In other words, you will delegate all the authority to them completely. Because how are they going to be really able to carry out a certain function without full authority? And you say, wouldn't you take a chance of losing several $1,000s with some female roles? Yes, I have and I do. And I don't think anything of it. But are you going to make it if you do not delegate the authority? In other words, are you going to have to be enough of a man to believe in the training you've given the female role to turn around and delegate the authority and let her make the mistakes? After all, would you make them? I mean, how can you expect the female role to be perfect when you make 50% mistakes too? Then if she's going to be you, does she have a right to make as many mistakes as you would make? You see, we're talking about, is there a reason why the male role doesn't want the female role to take over? He's afraid. And we have the same problem over here. She says what? I've had so much fun being submissive. I've had no responsibilities. I've had no problems. I've had not make any decisions. And now you want me to do what? Take over. By the way, now if she's going to be submissive, what's she going to have to do? Take over. Who's going to cut the grass? Does he have more important things to do? Right? Who's going to do the bills? Who's going to set up the accounting system and the budget? Does he have more important things to do? And then these other 3 businesses, she's going to take those over because he's got 4 other businesses on the other side of town he's got to run? You might wonder, are we talking about a new concept? No, we're talking about something as old-fashioned as the hills. And I'd like to refer you to the 31st chapter of Proverbs. Starting at the 10th verse, there's a description of the perfect woman. And I would advise all wives to read that once a week, at least the first 10 years of marriage. When you get through reading this particular passage of Scripture, you'll find out it does not leave one thing for the husband to do at all. She actually puts the washers on the water tap that's leaking. And the screen door that's flapping, she fixes it. In fact, if we wanted to go into this particular passage, you would find out that she deals in real estate. She plants vineyards. She has a factory. She makes income. And also, it's an interesting thing. Does it take one thing away from her husband? No. He's praised. He's honored. In fact, he arrives at a glorious position because, you see, what makes you great is not what you do with things, but what you do with people. I have a certain limitation when it comes to things. A cabinet maker can only make so many cabinets. Did you know that? A machinist can only turn so many turns in a day. Anytime I'm talking about something physical, is there a definite limitation to what I can do? Let's switch it to people. Is there a limitation of what I can do now? Then how do I determine the greatness of a man? I'll give you the criteria to determine the greatness of a man. If a man is going to be great, you will always see one common denominator of all great men. What's directly under him? A great man. And who's directly under him? A great man. And who's directly under him? A great man. In other words, I'm describing what? A whole army of great men. Now, how do they all become great? The guy that was underneath him, who trained him, who developed him? The great man did, didn't he? And who developed the men underneath this man? This particular man was able to develop the men underneath him because the great man developed him. And every time I go down the chain of command, I develop another line in the hierarchy. What's this do to the great man? He becomes greater and greater, because we say that if he developed this first man to this extent that he could develop the next man, must he be something. And as I keep going down the chain of command, I develop an entire army of great people. Now when I bring all of the talents and all the abilities of this whole army together, do I have a complete organization that can accomplish anything? Then the secret of the entire success of overcoming time and space and overcoming all the obstacles that the elements can throw at you is to be able to train and harness men that can fulfill the functions that you can fulfill. Now, back to the situation of the wife. Could you get the average American wife to assume the responsibilities of everything the man is doing? No. Does she know her husband well enough to do it? No. Do the children know the wife well enough to know what she wants? No. Does an employee in a business know what the boss wants? No. We can come all the way down the chain. All right, where is the fallacy? Where's the mistake? The man at the top has not done what with the man directly under him? He has not made a very clear carbon copy. You know, when I put carbons into a typewriter, I hit the key, and then I take the letter out, and I look at the first carbon, and I can just barely read what the letter says. What happens by the time I'm at the fifth or sixth carbon? Some words look like other words, don't they? In other words, we begin to wonder what the material is really saying. Could you pick up the sixth carbon and carry out the instructions? All right, now watch the lessons that you can learn from this. You could read the first carbon, though, couldn't you? All right, how many carbons should a guy really type to get a real clear image? One. All right, now how do you get the next carbon? You type it again. if you want to do 6 carbons, why doesn't the secretary type 6 times? It's time consuming, but could 6 different men do it 6 times in the same amount of time it takes you to do 1? All right, now what's the law? We're trying to break you in tonight on the most wonderful concept of being able to have other people do things for you. All right, and the law simply says that we type 6 carbons, even though the last 3 are smudgy, because we do not have time to type them individually. Therefore, if I have 6 men in an organization, do I have the time? How far away should a man be underneath you to be able to be exactly the rubber stamp of you, to be the carbon copy of you? 1 step away. If he goes more than 1 step away, what happens to communication? Well, you tell this guy to do something, then he turns around and tells the next guy to do something, and if he's not you, does he tell him something different? By the time it gets to the bottom of the chain of command, do they do what you want? Well, they figured something out entirely different because they have other ideas. But for our system to work, can anybody have any different kind of ideas? No, they have to be the same ideas all the way. So, should I spend more time developing a few? And should I develop them until they are identical twins of me? All right, now, there's one more freedom that we're going to arrive at in unity. Let's assume that I have got a chain of command of 3 in unity. I'm allowed to go talk to this person, and will this person think we're talking about him? Now, this is real freedom. Now, sometimes to expedite a matter, is it expedient for this man to talk to this man right now? Under the old chain of command, he would have to tell this man the story and then have this man tell this man the story. Now, you know that when I tell things over and someone else tells someone else, is there a chance for distortion? Is it not better to do it direct? Now, what happens the other way? In other words, can he break the chain and go to the top immediately? Have I saved time? And will he maybe solve his problem better than if he went to him, then he went to him, then he went to him, then he went to him? Now, under role relationship, it's essential that you follow the actual facts that we learn on the chain of command. I could go on the rest of the night describing to you the beauties of a unity relationship. Are you beginning to see its absolute freedom? No resistance. In this actual leadership role, we say that this female has seen his actions to such an extent that she knows what he would do. So if she really knows, why can't she do it? I mean, how's he going to be free to do something else if he has to do everything? So the purpose is that since she does know what he would do, then he steps out and lets her do it. Then we say she is him. So therefore, when you're asked a question, what happens to role relationship in unity? Out the window. Now, why would she need a judge role when she's him? I can't see that she would at all. In other words, we say then that she has actually arrived finally at a state of perfect freedom. Now let's use 2 illustrations. This particular executive is tired and he wants to rest, and so he goes to Florida for a vacation. As he leaves the office, who's running it? The executive secretary. Has he really left for Florida? No. He's there. Now you say, have I solved one of the biggest problems on earth? How to be 2 places at once? If you're going to be successful in this world, you're going to have to conquer time and space. By the way, has he conquered both time and space? He's laying in the sun, relaxing, and his corporation just bought a subsidiary. And they just sold those other 2 warehouses over on the other side of town. Now, had he been back at his desk, would they have done the same thing? You say, does an executive secretary have this much freedom? That's why they're paying her $800 a month. Now you're beginning to see real freedom. She originally was what? A love slave to the boss, and now what kind of freedom does she have? Any kind of freedom? She has as much freedom as he has because she is him. Let's say that the couple is courting. And she's playing a beautiful female role, just as submissive as she knows how to be. And he's playing a male role, and they've got a role relationship. Now, underneath role relationship, does she make any advances? No. This wouldn't be allowed. All right, let's assume that she falls in love. Let's also assume she's very affectionate. What do you suppose she'd like to do in the moonlight? Kissing. Can she? I want to show you now, we're handicapped even in role relationship, are we not? She can't kiss him. After all, she wants to be a good girl. She wants to be a mother of his children. She wants to be respected, therefore no advances. So finally, he gets around to it, and he kisses her. By the way, she's thrilled for waiting. I mean, she really hasn't lost anything. And he believes that he got a good girl. In other words, he believes that this woman is worthy to be the mother of his children. Now, let's assume 4 years later, it's unity. Now, what would you predict? She is now him. Now, did she have freedom in the moonlight? No, there was no freedom. She could not do what she desired to do. Under unity, let's actually describe a situation where he's tired and he's worked hard and he comes home and she's fresh as a daisy. And she's excited and she wants a real loving. Now, he's really not ambitious enough at this stage of the game to make advances. He's tired. But now, he wouldn't object to her. You see what I mean? In other words, he's not that tired. So, he comes through the door that evening, and she grabs him and rapes him. Now, if you want to know the joys of unity, it allows rape. In other words, we have perfect productivity. And is it all right? Does he call his mother up and say, I got a bad girl? He thinks he's got the angel. Does that simple illustration show you? In other words, I was doing some counseling the other day with a couple, and she was a little disgusted because she says, every once in a while when I'm in bed with him, I feel like doing something. And every time I do, we go into a fight for 2 weeks. In other words, what's he got in his head? Good girls can't move. And he believes it so strongly that, and by the way, she's normal. And can she move? No, because he thinks it's wrong. Now, do I know whether they have unity or not? There's no unity there at all. In other words, is she in bondage? We say that there's no productivity in their loving. This illustration of the boss in Florida and this illustration of the rape, does this show you then how these roles are totally interchanged? Now, what do you have to think of a female role before you will allow her to take over your position? Well, it's got to be a lot of respect here. If I were in contest, that's the last thing I'd let her do because she'd wipe me out for sure. In other words, if I'm going to let the female take my entire position, do I trust her totally? Do I believe that she is just as capable in this area as I am? So we say then, instead of him losing his identity, he's becoming more and more in different places at the same time and doing more than if he were there personally doing it. I think when you start getting into unity, it's so different from what you've been thinking that it scares you. Always in unity, I have to have a leader. I'd like to show you tonight how you can get something for nothing. If you're going to be successful in this world, you won't live long enough to make it unless you pick up a few things free. And most of the ways that people go after free things are in contest. In other words, if I enter a contest, there's nothing free. I would like to show you a method tonight, and it's the only method I know of on earth where you can actually have something for nothing. And I have two ways to do it. Number one, if this represents the male role, and if this represents the female role, I'd like for you to take the area of those two circles and compare it with the area of a unity relationship. Now, I have the same circumference here that I have here, but I have increased the area somewhere between 4 and 5 times. In other words, we say then 2 heads are better than 1. Now, it's interesting to know in that unity relationship, do I still have one head that makes the decisions? Very much so. There was a question asked, when people get married, can 2 live as cheap as 1? Let me give you the answer. If I put 2 people together, I said that the area would be somewhere between 4 and 5 times larger. What's your budget going to be after marriage? 4 or 5 times what it was before marriage. And it's only logical because does this kind of a person have more interests, more desires, and more needs than these? But have I got something for nothing here? I really do. I've got, if you subtract this from this, what you actually have as the difference is what you receive something for nothing for. So we say when I change role relationship into unity, I receive something for nothing. All right, now the second way I do it. This happens to be myself. And this happens to be a student approximately in her 40s that I had at Portland State. She lives at a city that takes approximately 4 hours to drive to Portland. She attended a class at Portland State, and it was the second term that she was going to this class before I found out who she was and that she was driving that far just for my class. And she said it was just for my class. So she gave me some of the 7A's. Well, I began to react immediately. Do I give her some 7A's? I mean, this is great. By the way, I must have encouraged her because she actually gave an appraisal report, and it's the only time I've ever had a student give an appraisal report where they got completely a round of applause. She got an A in for her coursework all the way through. So we had built up what we call a unity relationship between 2 people. Now, something was casually mentioned. I wanted to buy some sheep. 200 of them. Now, did I think that she was going to finance them? Of course not. I didn't think that she even had that much money. But it just happened to be in the conversation. Now, let's assume that the unity relationship between the 2 of us is a +5. Now, she happens to have a mother, and she's running about a +50 unity relationship with her mother who has money to invest. She's casually talking to her mother. Is there any motive here yet? In other words, she just happens to mention the sheep. Her mother meets me in a town near my ranch, and I run a +10. Now, when do I pick up my +10? Before I ever met her. Now, did I have anything to do with that +10? Did I get something for nothing again? Now, I would like to prove to you that I have a +10, which is twice what I earned, right? We're standing there talking, and she wants to write out a check for $3,000 and hand it to me. And I want to take it. I mean, we understand each other, her mother and myself, perfectly. So we're getting ready to perform this transaction, and the daughter says, wait a minute, don't do that. We should have a lawyer write this up because we need collateral. This is just beautiful the way this happens. She, as the mother, ignores me. In other words, as if I'm not there. She turns around to her own daughter and she says, I thought you said you knew him. Then they have their own private conversation. They get so involved they don't even realize I'm listening to them. So she turns around and she says to her mother, yes, I know him, but I don't know him that well. Then they realize I'm standing there. How do you suppose she feels? Here she's talking about me in front of me. She's saying that she doesn't know me well enough to trust me, isn't she? And yet we've got a relationship. Now watch this. The mother turns around. Now, I'd only met her for 5 minutes. She turns around and says, well, you might not know him that well, but I do. And she gives me the check. Shook her daughter up. Now, does that prove that I have more here than I have here? Where did I get it from? I borrowed it from 40-some years of the law of fair exchange in a role relationship. I'm not that old. In other words, this was going on before I was born, was it not? And yet I was able to borrow some of this and put it here. Now, in business, we call this repeat, and we call this referral. And I've had salesmen tell me that they've had somebody that they've really sold, and they've worked hard to sell them, and they've set up this kind of a relationship. Then this person has sent a friend to contact them. Any salesman has to do what with a new person? The whole pitch. I mean, you can't just give them the merchandise. I mean, that wouldn't be right. So he says, I get all wound up, and he finds out that this person is more sold than the one that he has worked on. Isn't this interesting? So this person, he really just wants the merchandise. I've had salesmen tell me they were very surprised that this person didn't even have to be sold. That's why sometimes a referral is stronger than a repeat. Now you can tell the difference in this repeat referral on the basis of if it were a contest, this would operate the same way, only I would have negative figures. Now what I have said, the way I get something for nothing, would I get more negative than I really deserve. I've heard people say, well, I've been bad and I've done things I shouldn't, but it's not as bad as what they're saying. I mean, I wouldn't care if it was just the truth, but I mean, they've exaggerated it. And this is true, since we're emotional human beings. If somebody tells me something and I tell somebody else, well, I exaggerate it. I'll tell you why I do it, and I'll tell you why you do it. We want to make sure we get it across really the way it is, don't we? And we're afraid that if we don't really emphasize it, they won't really know the truth. So in the process of making sure they know the truth, we distort it. The next time you're at a party, play a little game. Tell a story to somebody and have them tell it the whole evening all the way around, and have the final person stand up and tell the story, and then have the one who started the story stand up and tell his story. Then everybody can laugh. Sometimes these can be totally different stories. Now an interesting thing happens here. In role relationship, under a unity type operation, what if I should suddenly get a promotion? Is this person happy? Because everything I have, they have. Remember our 4 methods to actually receive what we want in the world. Number 1 is to stop wanting. Number 2 is contest. Number 3 is law of fair exchange. Under role relationship, I go in a completely different way. Have you ever heard of the word share?